Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be finishing up our brief series on making our own instrument flight, and this time we're going to be using a different tool, Global Positioning System. And what that's going to do is allow us to be a lot more precise than we were with the DMR, I've invented a new one, DME, as well as the VOR approach that we created earlier. Now of course, we still have some calculations to do, and we'll do them briefly as we get set up. Let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and climb in my lovely little Cirrus here. I'm going to kind of wander down here, snap on the pitot heat button. We're down here at Robertson. We're going to be flying up to Simsbury Airport, which has no instrument approaches, which is going to make this super fun for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my CDI over to GPS mode, and I'm going to go ahead and we can't suspend yet because we have no course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and pop over. Oops. Look at how not centered this is. Boop. There we go. That's me. It's me. Notice it has no idea where we are. Not really worried about that just yet. Boop, 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 boop. Nice. I would swear everything's upside down, which tells me my zoom is probably a little funky. And I'm not going to worry about it too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to flight plan. I'm going to scroll down to a destination. This is much easier with a destination. Go ahead and use the little knob. I'm going to press the keyboard mode. I'm going to press 4 Bravo 9er. So after I do that, I'm going to press the enter key a couple times. Runway, of course, today we're going to be using runway 3, which is going to be the one that faces northish. It's a bit of a cheat, and keep in mind in the real world we might not be able to get away with that. Now, why do we care about all that? Well, let me show you why. If you zoom out right now, you will observe the fact that because I dialed in a runway, we actually now have a lovely pink line of safety that's going to get us all the way down to the runway. Do you see what I did there? Which means now, if I take off and I fly to this pink line of safety, I can now safely guide myself all the way down to the runway laterally, but not necessarily left and right. So that's good news for us. The other thing, of course, that means is we know how far away we are from a particular point. As a matter of fact, now that that's all set, I can actually close my little flight plan option. Now, you're probably looking down here and saying, something's wrong. And of course, if I go here, fits with the button, you'll notice something is wrong. You'll notice the fact that it does not give me any lateral information here. That's because it's got a specific omni-bearing selector selection built into this right now, because there's no way that we got here from there. Now, the nice thing here is watch what happens when I get over there with this airplane. You'll observe the fact that we still get no lateral information. That's because the way that this GPS is set up, or I should say this G1000 system is set up, is that you have to have somewhere to get somewhere. Exactly, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my flight plan page, and I'm actually going to grab myself my little runway 03 here, press the direct button, and then I'm going to press enter. Now what you'll notice is we have this little thing here that'll actually tell us where we need to point our aircraft. Now, of course, we're backwards here, so we're going to do some quick little ground handling, and then go ahead and flip on the navigational hold mode so we actually have the ability to get down to the ground. Now, one of the things you're going to observe here is several things. First of all, we're interested in runway 3 here. And as this aircraft is lining itself up with this particular spot here, let's go ahead and flip on navigational hold here, is you're going to observe the fact that we are not approaching runway 3. We are indeed actually approaching runway 36. And we know this, if you recall, because when this thing was originally set with its omni bearing, it of course selected a desired track of 360. See how that starts to get a little tricky? So what we're going to do is we're going to intentionally go ahead and tweak this a little bit. So everything's looking pretty good as far as our stuff goes. So inside of my flight plan, I'm actually going to come in here. I'm going to define the origin that we actually came from here. Now, the difference this is going to do for us is going to be quite a bit. So if I go 4 Bravo 8, which is where we came from, enter, you'll notice that something has changed. You'll observe actually that our little flight plan, let me go clean this up a little bit so you can see it, now indicates something a little better. We're a little closer to our desired kind of heading, sort of a thing like there. And you can see our aircraft is desperately trying to kind of spiral and turn itself in all sorts of directions as it's trying to get itself to this lovely runway 3 here. The other thing you're going to observe is as it's desperately trying to get itself to runway 3 is that it's not actually really that well lined up, except that if you look really, really, really carefully, my desired track is 30. Now, one of the interesting things, of course, is if you take off from Robertson and fly directly to good old-fashioned Simsbury here, you'll notice that that will go ahead and give us that opportunity to go ahead and go basically directly onto the runway. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this. And the reason I'm changing this is because we want to kind of see exactly how difficult this can be if we needed to flip what runway we're going to be doing. Again, we like to make things difficult for ourselves, don't we? So I'm going to go ahead and press the level mode, just going to hold my wings level as I kind of come into my flight plan, and I clean everything up. We can activate things. We can go ahead and actually delete my flight plan. And the reason I deleted that flight plan is I want to reset everything so we can get it all programmed the way we want. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to this one. I'm going to go flip back to origin here. We'll go ahead and pop back on the keyboard. We started from 4 Bravo 8. That sounds good to me. And of course, we have no runway or anything. I'm not worried about that. This would be if we wanted to set a specific one. And like I said, we're going up to 4 Bravo 9. So let's go back to keyboard mode, 4 Bravo 9, enter, and keep it nice and simple for us. Boop. And you'll see again, it does that. Now, what I want to do is I actually want to land runway 21. So I'm actually going to come in here and press enter again. And you'll notice that what it does is it attempts to line us up with the actual airport we have right over there. The other thing you'll observe too is we're in this nice little tight turn. Oh! Anybody see that spiral of death the aircraft attempted to do there? Good times, right? Okay, there we go. Let's go line ourselves back up. Autopilot back on. Thank you. And now what we need to do is we need to actually program this to come in from the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this lovely button. I'll go ahead and close this out. This says OBS. And what that does is that suspends waypoint sequencing. That means that if I grab this knob, you can observe over on my map that I can actually change the direction that I'm approaching my landing. Now, if you recall earlier, I was mentioning we want to land on runway 21 here. So I'm just going to keep cranking the sucker until it gets to runway 21. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is if you look really, really carefully here, especially if we zoom in a little bit for you, you'll see that our runway 21 does not line up with runway 21. We actually need to be a slightly different angle than runway 21. So I'm going to come in just a little bit here. And again, it's very challenging because our aircraft is not flying level at the moment. Level! Level, man. Level. 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 Level, my guy. Level. You're supposed to hold my wings. Hold my wings. Thank you. And what does it do? It doesn't hold my wings. Oh, man. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. I love it when it does that. All right, fine. I'll do it correctly. Jeez, man. Make me work for everything. So what you'll see here is that my OBS, my course does not perfectly line up with the runway. So what I actually have to do is I have to adjust my course so that it does. And you can see I can sit here and carefully crank this sucker over until we're at that magic 217 degrees, which is basically right through the runway heading, which you can see. Now that that's all set, we need to go ahead and start figuring out how we're going to get this plane down to the ground. Now, the nice thing is in the last video, we calculated that this is, of course, we need a 300-foot minimum, which this is a 200-foot field elevation. That gives me a 500-foot minimum. So I'm going to come over here and I'll get that all nice and programmed in for us as well. Timer ref, we're going to make our way down to here. We're going to crank this one to barrow. We're going to set this to 500 feet. If we were on radar altimeter, we could do 300 there. Of course, this is a GPS approach, which gives us a little more latitude, but 500 feet is probably going to be pretty safe. That's 300 feet above ground level. The next thing we're going to do is, now that we got that all set up, is we're going to figure out how long we're going to have to descend. This is not going to be a precision approach. It's just mathematically impossible for us to do that because of the fact that we're going to be coming in basically on something we've invented today, and that's going to be basically a left down to here. So we know that our final little descent business is going to be a 3 miles approach. It's going to be at a 3 degree. For every mile, by the way, you get about 300 feet. So that's going to get us about 1,000 feet down. That works great. Since we know the field elevation is about 1,200 feet, we know that it's going to take us about 3 miles to cover that 1,200 feet. Of course, keeping in mind that we've got that 500-foot minimum as well. We're going to be approaching at 90 knots, which is also going to get us about 500 feet per minute, which is not too bad. Sounds a lot worse than it really is, but it actually isn't, so don't worry about it. But that also means it's going to take us 2 minutes to travel 3 miles. Cool, huh? Math is cool. And again, you can see the previous video for me actually crunching the numbers on that if you'd like. So now that that's all preset and ready to go, it's just a matter of getting us all nice and lined up. Now, one of the nice things is we have a bunch of tools to make this simpler. One thing, of course, is if we look at the top of the screen, we can see our distance is 2.2 miles, and we know that we're 2.06 nautical miles away from the track that we need to be on. Good. That gets us about a 2-mile left turn. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and select my minimum altitude here, and I'm going to start descending towards it. And the reason we want to do this is we need to be about that height. Now, one of the things we're not taking into account here as we invent our own instrument approach is the fact that we don't know just how close we're going to be to any sort of obstacles. Fortunately, we have SVT, which makes our life slightly simpler. Not here, we have 5G problems with SVT, so that makes it a little more challenging. But the key element here is that's actually going to work fairly well for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed up time a little bit here, and we're also going to go ahead and start our descent. So I'm going to go ahead and do an indicated airspeed descent, which is just simple for me. We'll throttle back a crack. Again, you don't have to do it. It's a Cirrus. It'll slow down on its own. 1, 2, 3. Let's give it a little bit of a burst of speed here. I'm trying to give myself enough room to operate. 1, 2, 3. All right, perfect. That gets us nice and leveled off. And now we can actually begin our instrument approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my heading hold off. I'm going to tap that button. It's always recommended, otherwise the plane goes all over the place. And I'm going to grab this thing, and I'm going to go ahead and pull ourselves here, and we're going to give ourselves a westerly heading so we can have basically a 30-degree little kind of angle off the bow, so to speak here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch heading hold back on, and I'm going to go ahead and continue our turn here. Now, one of the great things about all these autopilot systems is they all work in conjunction with each other and they're designed well. So what we're going to do is we're going to come around. You can see we're about 2 miles or so cross-track error. And we know that from our destination, we're about 6 miles away, which gives us plenty of time to get down to our 90 knots. So we're just going to enjoy my nice little gentle turn here. I'm actually going to bring that in slightly less. I don't want it to be quite that harsh. And again, you can see this little digital display here giving us a pretty good idea of what to expect. So that looks pretty good to me. Remember, on OBS here, we're suspended, which is what we want. And we're going to come down here and actually go ahead and tap the nav button. We're not going to be using an approach hold here. If we attempted to use an approach hold, we're going to be disappointed. I hate to tell you this, but we have to do the approach hold. And again, I'm going to cheat as hard as I possibly can for this operation today in order to make things kind of interesting for us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my altitude selector. I'm going to go ahead and crank that down to 500 feet. You can see GPS is now captured, and we can now look up here, and we have 5 nautical miles to go. At 3 nautical miles to go, we have to begin our descent down. Keep in mind, we're going to take advantage of every trick in the book in order to get us down as safely as possible here. Again, not going to look out the window. I could shut off SVT if you want to see something a little more dramatic. So let's do a mental check here. So at 3 nautical miles, we're going to begin a 450 to 500 feet per minute descent at 90 knots. When we hit 500 feet, that's basically where we're going to have to make a decision whether or not we're going to put the plane down on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and pop and click a flap. So we're at 4.4. We're also going to engage our timer. We have 2 minutes to get down to the ground. Keep in mind, we're not dealing with anything such as, we're not going to do, any missed approaches or anything like that, because we've literally invented this approach on our own here. There's 90 knots right there. I'm going to go and pop in that next notch of flaps. I'm try to get this thing nice and ready. That's it. Oh, look how much power it requires when you put that second notch of flaps down. This thing just gets slow. Very much a Cirrus. Very, very, very much a Cirrus. Nothing bad. Nothing bad. It just is what it is. All right, 3.7. Everybody, deep breath in, deep breath out. This is going to be fun. 3.6. Here we go. 3.5. Remember, we're not going to look out the window until we hit minimums here. Remember, we're taking advantage of much more precise technology than we were a minute ago. 3.2. Oh my gosh, I hope this works better than the last one. All right, let's begin our descent. So what I'm going to do is vertical speed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull the throttle back a little bit. And here we go. All we have to do is keep the plane steady. We're looking at 90 knots, about 500 feet per minute. All we have to do is relax and watch the time. You're all sitting here looking at the SVT, aren't you? You're all cheaters. You don't know whether or not this is going to work. This is just a demonstration on how precise this can be. Now remember, we did not calculate these little mountains here. We just did all the math and taking advantage of what we learned last time in order to make this procedure appropriate. All right, coming down here, and I can actually see very carefully that we're actually in a perfectly lined up with runway. We actually have a bit of an oblique going on here, but that's okay. It just means we're going to hit the runway at the side. And you can actually see this long extended line where we're supposed to come in. That's okay. And again, this is just seat of the pants kind of stuff here, and it's just what makes these things so much more fun. It also gives you an idea of how challenging it is to mathematically set up an instrument approach. Kind of cool. All right, 90 knots, 200 feet to go. Blast of power here. We're going to be definitely at an oblique here, but that's pretty typical for non-precision approaches. And we definitely got an oblique. Now, the interesting thing is if we were bad people, we could grab this handle now and crank this so it actually lines up with the runway like this. Of course, the problem with that is we're already on approach now, and we just hit minimums, so you can see how dangerous that is. There is our runway, by the way, so let's go ahead and now take ourselves out, and we'll go ahead and take a nice gentle left turn here, and there is our runway. And you can see there that this approach was much, 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 much more accurate than our other approach there, which I think we could have done that a couple more times and kind of practiced it and got it better. But as you can see, with a little bit of wherewithal and a little bit of practice, we can invent instrument approaches anywhere on Earth. I'm sure there's a fun exercise here that we could probably experiment with where we try to do an instrument approach into like a grass field or something like really inappropriate like that. But we're not going to experiment with that too much. And we're down. Let's go ahead and fix up for the wind here. That's pretty good. Delightful. So as you can see, it is certainly possible. It doesn't mean it's a good idea. It doesn't mean it's recommended. And as you probably noticed, there are so many, many, many details that you would have to get right in the air in order to safely get down onto the ground. It's not to say we didn't achieve both. It's just to say that it's very, very dangerous and not recommended. Enjoy.